Welcome to the McKinley Diaries, 21 years on with myself, Nigel Vardy. We are on day 4, the 3rd of May, 1999. Running down the glacier at 3 o'clock in the morning is a whole new experience, as it was minus 15 centigrade or 4 Fahrenheit when I got up. So what time was it then? Now you're probably wondering why I'm going down a glacier at 3 o'clock in the morning. Base camp had a toilet. Very basic toilet. It was just a thunderbox, we called it, a box with a seat on. The rules were quite strict about not leaving any kind of waste at base camp, and I completely agree. I've been to many parts of the world and climbed in many places where camp is frankly brown and yellow. Let's not go down that avenue. So you will go to the toilet. Well, I went and got back in my bag very quickly. When I did wake up, I'd got cold feet in the night. I wonder why. But also I'd been pushing on the tent wall. I'd slid down and was pushing against the tent, which compressed the bag, which probably didn't help. Anyway, we got up at 7:30. And one thing we learned very quickly, myself and Steve, and Anthony was in a separate tent, by the way, just so you know that. So Steve and myself are in a 3-man and Anthony's in a 2-man. And we did this just in case one tent got trashed. We could always all pile into the other. Of course, Steve snores, kind of everything. But what we did find was that every morning you've been breathing all night and your breath has frozen onto the top of the tent. So the zips have got rime ice on. The tent's covered in this very, very, very fine mist of ice. And everything you touch, it instantly drops on your head, down the back of your neck, everywhere. So getting up every morning was a very, very delicate task. The sun was up, but it was still bitterly cold. And my hands froze instantly as I ran to punch them into my gloves. Now this is at 7,000 feet. What's it going to be like at 17,000? Well, we got up, packed up camp and rigged our sleds. We were going to use sleds to pull as much equipment as possible to the base of the mountain and then carry them over with us. They're like a children's sled you'd buy at a garage, supermarket sort of thing. Now, unlike some of the later sleds I've used on other expeditions, which have aluminium poles and big rigs, these you pull on thin kit cord. And it all sounds easy to rig. I assure you it's not. Because when we left camp, we go down something called Heartbreak Hill and onto the main glacier. It's not a steep hill, but it's steep enough. And it's called Heartbreak Hill because it's the last hill you climb when you're coming home, which is okay when you're going down it, except for the fact that every damn foot you put forward, the sled comes and taps you on the back of the ankles, and it's irritating. We set off for Camp 1 at 8,000 feet, and the American group were behind us. Now, they were on skis. We weren't experienced in using skis, so we chose to use snowshoes, and we were quite convinced they'd pass us by miles. And down the hill we went, with the sleds rolling over and us swearing, and things bashing us on the back of the heels until we got on the main glacier, and then it eased out a little bit. We pulled for 3 hours and then we had a brew. And I can remember how beautifully flat the surface was. It was phenomenal, not quite groomed, but not far off, except for the crevasses. As I stopped having a drink, I sat and looked around me because it was so easy to walk just staring at your feet. Peaks range from huge, jagged towers to rounded domes of snow. The empty desert of ice, silent except for the odd ski plane and a few climbers speaking. And no wildlife at all, or so I thought. Something the size of a snow bunting suddenly appeared and sat on the bag. And there's not a tree, a blade of grass for miles. And still to this day, I've no idea how these things survive. But there it was. It said hello. And then it went. We started hauling up the glacier again and were passed strongly by a Spanish party as they were away on skis together. Now, I'd been to Chile before this trip and tried to learn Spanish. I'm terrible at languages. I managed a pretty miserable buenos dias, and they replied in the most excellent of English. And I felt actually quite embarrassed, to be frankly honest. Anyway, they were soon gone. We kept on our way on our snowshoes, and by 7 p.m. we were pretty shattered. We had reached where we wanted to be that night, generally, and of course there's no time to waste. There's no time here to go and have a cup of tea and have a minute and think about life. You get your shovel out and you get digging. And I've already got the measurements here. 20 feet long by 20 feet wide by 4 feet deep. Get digging. Just in case the storms come, build a wall around it. Get your tents inside. Get your gear inside. Get yourself some ice blocks cut for water, for boiling, because that's the one thing you can't carry is water. There's plenty of it around you, but you need lots of fuel to boil it. We finally got down and ate, and it was 10:30 at night. What a tester that day was. But it was still light, which confused us slightly. What we could do, though, is vaguely see the route in the distance, the West Rib, down the Kahiltna Northeast Fork. And it was miles away and enormous. I remember lying there that night saying, can we actually do this? Can we get the sledges down this glacier? How are the sledges going to manage? It looks far more undulating. It looks a big crevasse field. But for that night, it was a time to drink and rehydrate. We'd really burned some liquid out of us, and we needed to get plenty of liquid back in. And I usually like lots of tea and coffee, which I know isn't the ideal on a mountain trip, but at least it's warm, and plenty of hot chocolate. We had quite an interesting debate over the sleds that day and certainly that night, but by about 11 o'clock-ish, we'd had enough, and it was time to zip up the tents and get some sleep.